Welcome back to the Eric Krown Crypto channel. Wishing you a happy healthy start to this nice Saturday morning over here as we do get prepared for some very higher term time frame closures. We got the weekly for CME coming in yesterday, and then we also got the bi-weekly coming in tomorrow, as well, of course, the weekly alongside that. So with that in mind, I wanted to prepare for all of the next week to come and then follow up on the short term time frames, of which I put out a very short term time frame focused update on Instagram stories this morning. It's just a lot easier to do that, especially when I'm going through my morning rock, rather than, booting up the old computers here. But I suppose now would be a good time to get into this as we first focus on the short-term time frame. So Bitcoin did get rejected from that 302 fib right here. That would be the tops of the range, about 21,000 bucks, a little bit above there to be fair, which yesterday, yes, I was wrong on that. It's, about 21,150 if you want to be super exact. So in this case, I am looking for a pullback based off of that. We do see that momentum oscillators are starting to turn down right now on all of the short-term time frames. If I can actually bring them up, there we go. Starting off with the 6 hour right here, we do see downside momentum will sustain as long as Bitcoin is closing below 20,900. 4 hour is already obviously there and is going to be remaining with downside pressure as long as Bitcoin's below 21,000 bucks. We see the bi hourly with downside pressure as long as Bitcoin's below 21,050, and the hourly is probably flippy floppy here, but maybe even also downside as long as Bitcoin's below 20,600 or so. So yeah, short term looking for a bit of a pullback, and we also even do see ever so slightly positive funding rates right here. Not super problematic or anything like that, but ultimately, the weekend would be a good time for a bit of a short-term pullback. With that in mind, what are the big areas to be aware of? Same thing as yesterday, basically 20,100 or so on a 4 hour time frame closure. Even an hourly probably gets it as well, to be fair. And yes, I would start to look at this as not just necessarily a pullback, but a medium term time frame pullback, not just a short term time frame pullback, with targets likely down somewhere around the mid to low $19,000. Here's the thing though, as we're going to go over, I still do think that the statistics, or probabilistically speaking, Bitcoin is still more likely to put in a higher low, whether it be somewhere in this region right here, a little bit lower, and very likely try to the upside coming into next week, probably even early next week as well. So why do I say that? Why am I going off of all this? Well, let me just double check right here. Yep. Okay. Yeah, we do see a bit of rejection of the bullish control zone. So that would also be tacked onto the short-term time frame pullback regions. But anyways, onto the higher term time frames here. So here's the thing. CME did close the week out where? Closed the week out actually just below 21,200 or so. Did confirm a drive of phantom bullish evidence on that closing basis as well. And so I would be looking for next week to very likely at minimum try somewhere up around the 21 exponential moving average, which is the yellow moving average right here at about 21,700 is where it's at right now. That can obviously have greater implications with the higher term timeframes, as we'll go over, because here's the thing. When we go into the statistically based analysis of this, of which I'll bring up this chart for what it's worth right here, we do see that on average, anytime that we have seen the 5-day stochastic momentum oscillator cross the upside whilst or just cross in any direction actually, whilst the 5-day BBWP indicator, which is a volatility indicator, is going into a contraction mode, which I define as both with the BBWP itself having a negative slope below the moving average, which also has a negative slope. And we saw like kind of a critical read above about 80 percentile right here. That accompanied by the stochastic direction has actually gotten some pretty nasty mean reversion plays to the tune of, if we can dial all the way back, I mean, there's actually a lot of iterations right here, 11 to be exact, to the tune of an average move about just under 54%. There is some good variance in these, but we have seen as little as 21% moves, as great as like multiple or like 100% moves. But I'd say definitely in the middle there, we do see on average between about 30 to 50%. If you want to go with the full average, about 50%. But if you get rid of the extremes, probably more around 35-ish, let's say. And the stochastic momentum oscillator has gotten the correct direction on those moves for 10 out of 11 times, which is just under 91% right there. So in this case, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because we actually did see this one cross the upside. I believe it was maybe yesterday. I think it was yesterday or the day before that when we actually got the closure for that, and will be remaining with upside posturing as long as Bitcoin is closing above 19,600 or so. So that is important because, well, for right now, Bitcoin's above that region. Of course, below 20,100, that condition very likely does get tested. So I would keep a keen eye on that region. That's kind of where a lot of the analysis essentially hinges upon. But here's the thing, if we are going to see, or if we do see that that condition sustained, then, well, kind of adding the, I'd say about 35% is kind of a little bit more reasonable, or 40%, puts Bitcoin somewhere around about $23,500 to as much as $24,000. Even 50% is kind of interesting right here, because it would put Bitcoin at about 26,200. Keep that number in your mind's eye, because that actually is the average reversion on this. I do think that it'd be relevant to say that it's probably gonna be lower than that, just personal opinion. But if we even do come up with this number, can we find anything else that essentially is confluential with that? Well, I do think so, actually. If we go back to this chart over here and we reference the chart that we were working off of yesterday, or I mean, it's basically been all the days. And in this case, we do see, or sorry, no, this was a different chart actually. Yes, it was this chart right here. We do see a bit of a pattern going on. Now, I'm not a big pattern trader. I'm not a pattern trader at all, really, but there are, a couple patterns that actually will call out. The ascending and descending triangles actually do have a good enough hit rate, in my opinion, to put a little bit of weight on. At the end of the day, these all just boil down to trend anyways, but in this case, as long as Bitcoin is essentially maintaining on a closing basis above that last local low, which was in the low $19,000 region, then we do have an ascending triangle actually in the making right here. Of course, when it comes to any pattern, or especially these sort of patterns, the only way to confirm them is when you actually do bust on through the top side in this case, thus confirming it, thus having a nice intended target as well, or an implied target, if you will, which would be this move right here at about 26,500. Very, 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 very similar to what we saw over here on, I mean, actually it would be basically just in line with that if I did the full on 54% mover. So I do imagine at about $26,500. Not only that, but that does align with the 1.618 Fibonacci extension here as well. So, a lot of confluential factors if that does happen. So that would be contingent upon actually busting on through, not 21,100 or 200 or whatever the fucking number is, but this is more relevant to the higher term timeframes, which the top side is about 22,500 or 22,600 if you want to be super exact, somewhere around there. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, or Frank's gonna say some in the comments, but I still haven't learned the fucking saying. Oh well, man, I can always count on you, man. So yeah, here's also another couple of interesting things that can happen as soon as tomorrow with the weekly and bi-weekly closures. When we go over here and we go to the actual weekly time frame, let me actually go to the index here just to double check. Yeah, so weekly stochastic momentum will turn back onto the upside for the first time since January, since like literally January, which was a nice bounce. It's a failed bounce ultimately, but it was a nice bounce nonetheless, with any sort of a closure above 20,150, which is actually above the short-term time frame pivot at 20,100 or so. So as long as Bitcoin does remain above there, overall good for the Bulaws for likely a try higher first before, in my opinion, what I think is most likely to happen is probably another retest of lows, maybe even a little bit lower as well. That'd be nice and fun. But ultimately, the weekly stochastic momentum oscillator getting within this vicinity and crossing to the upside, has been a good indication of some pretty high probability bounces in the past. So I'm just going to mark this off right here and kind of back test it with you. Shit, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but because it looks like I already have a lot of these already set in here. But basically this bounce over here, that was about a 47-ish% bounce. Do we have one over here, or was this an iteration? No, we are much lower in this current one. But this one over here, that was February 2019. Again, actually, was pretty much on the low, to be fair. Took a long time for Bitcoin to get going, a couple months to be exact, but was a pretty damn good indication that, the downside was more or less over in that case. This one, another failed bounce, but a pretty good bounce nonetheless. This was in July 2018. This bounce was to the tune of about 40+%. Not bad right there over the course of about a month from the confirmation of that. And we had a couple more examples here in the 2014-2015 saga, as you can see. Again, the first one did fail, obviously. That was about a 70% move, to be fair. And the second one was like an almost immediate reaction of 100%. Did come back down and retest later, basically did retest later. But that was the low, so to speak. So, it took some time, obviously, and then we do have the lows from 2011 as well. And here's the other very interesting thing, in my opinion, as well, is that if we take this off and go to the bi-weekly, which is also closing tomorrow at the same time as the weekly time frame, this one will also cross up with any sort of a closure above $20,000. Now, what's interesting about this is that we've actually only ever seen the bi-weekly stochastic momentum oscillator like this low one other time in history. That was all the way back on over here in 2011. So I don't even know how much I trusted this, but this was like literally at a fucking 6 read, which Basically almost never happens. For reference, right now it's at like a 9, which is like extreme as well. Was that even the low in November 2011? Yeah, it was actually. It was. So that was pretty damn good. But ultimately, the weekly and the biweekly kind of moving in the same direction, as is the 5-day, as is all of those statistics and probabilities I've kind of brought up earlier and over this past week, of which there are several more, but I don't feel the need to go over them today. I do still think that it's a little more likely for Bitcoin to try to a greater bounce first out of this range. I think best case scenario, we see somewhere maybe around $26,500, play out that measure move. And then personally, we can probably do reject. I don't think that Bitcoin's going to be closing over $30,000 anytime soon. Maybe not even this year. Personally speaking, but again, the longer that Bitcoin kind of hold here sideways without like really shitting the bed, that would be a pretty damn good sign for me. But I do kind of remain with what I've been saying. If Bitcoin does fail below, let's say 15.5, 16,000 bucks long term, I don't think you're going to be finding any lows at like 10, 11, 12,000. I know that that's kind of like the general consensus in the market. I do think that Bitcoin's going to see like a catastrophic just black swan, similar to what you saw in March 2020. But I'm going to hold off on that opinion for right now. We can maybe talk about that tomorrow on a macro Sunday analysis. But for right here, I think that'll do it. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you on this nice Saturday. Yeah, Saturday. It is a Saturday indeed. I forgot to mention that daily stoke will turn up above 20,400, but I actually don't trust this. I think this one will actually fail right there, to be fair. And I'll just be going off of short-term time frame ranges for right now. It's a weekend after all. It's like, for fuck's sake. Weekend price action, not my forte, but the ranges typically do work rather well. So barring any sort of a heroic reclaim back above about 21,000 bucks, generally sideways, maybe a little bit more downside. Be aware of where those validations are, and the higher term timeframes, hopefully, as long as Bitcoin does kind of remain above that low $90,000 region, do take over in this next week or two and into the back end of July. Anyways, with that said, take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.